My dad walked into my room with a serious face and said, "Your sister needs your savings to pay her debt." I froze. All my life, I had saved every dollar, every cent, working late nights and skipping things I wanted. And now, in just one sentence, he was asking me to give it all away to the same sister who had never cared about my struggles. But what my dad didn't know was that I had something in my drawer that could turn this whole situation upside down. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Hannah. I live in a small apartment with my family in Ohio. We are not rich, but we are not starving either. My dad works long hours in a factory. My mom passed away when I was 12, and since then, I have learned to be independent. My sister Lily is 3 years older than me but acts like she is younger. She loves going out, wearing new clothes, and buying expensive things she doesn't need. She has a job, but it barely covers her lifestyle, and most of the time she ends up asking Dad for help. I am the opposite. Since I was 14, I worked small jobs, babysitting, cleaning houses, walking dogs, even working at the local grocery store after school. I saved every single dollar I could. I wasn't saving for fun. I had a dream. I wanted to open a small bakery one day. I love baking, and people say I make the best cookies in the neighborhood. For years, I resisted the temptation to spend my money. When my friends bought new phones, I kept my old one. When Lily went on trips, I stayed home. My savings were my pride. They were proof of my hard work. That's why, when my dad stood there asking me to give it all to Lily, my heart sank. I didn't want to sound selfish, but I couldn't stop thinking, why should I fix a mess she created herself? My dad looked tired, his eyes heavy. He didn't shout, but there was a weight in his voice, the kind of weight that makes you feel like you have no choice. "Hannah," he said quietly, "she's in trouble. She owes money to people who are not patient. If we don't help her now, things could get dangerous." That made me even more nervous. I didn't like hearing words like dangerous connected to my sister, but at the same time, I knew that if I gave up my savings, it would take me years to rebuild them. I kept quiet for a few seconds, my mind racing. My dad probably thought I was deciding how to hand over the money, but I was actually thinking about something else, something I had hidden in my drawer. 2 weeks ago, after a long shift at the grocery store, I helped my coworker, Sarah, move into her new apartment. She was grateful, and the next day she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a colorful scratch card. "Just for fun," she had said, smiling. I almost threw it in the trash because I had never been lucky with things like that. But that night, when I was sitting on my bed, I decided to scratch it with a coin. At first, I didn't notice anything special. Then I saw the numbers. I checked them again and again, my hands shaking. It was a winning card. Not a small win, not $20 or $50. This was big, life-changing big. I couldn't believe it. I hid it in my drawer under a pile of school papers, telling myself I would figure out what to do later. And now, as my dad stood in front of me asking for my savings, I realized that this card could change everything. But a part of me was scared. If I gave it to him, Lily would get away with her bad habits again. If I didn't, maybe she would end up in even worse trouble. My stomach felt heavy as I looked at my dad's face. He didn't know I was holding a secret that could solve all our problems. I wondered what he would say if I pulled it out right now and handed it to him. Would he be proud of me? Would he be angry that I had kept it a secret? I could hear Lily laughing faintly in the living room, probably talking to one of her friends. She had no idea what was happening in here. I thought about all the times she had borrowed things from me without asking, my clothes, my makeup, even my laptop once, and returned them damaged or not at all. I thought about how she had never apologized, how she always acted like I owed her something just because she was older. And now she wanted my future too. My dad sat down on the edge of my bed, his hands clasped together. "Please, Hannah," he said softly. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." His voice cracked a little, and it made me feel guilty. I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to be the kind of person who turned away from family in need. But was it really helping if I gave her money without her learning anything? Maybe she would just get into debt again. My eyes drifted to the drawer across the room. That small piece of cardboard inside it suddenly felt like it was burning a hole through the wood. I remembered the rush of excitement I felt when I realized it was a winner. I remembered calculating in my head how much it could cover: college, my bakery dream, maybe even a small car. I had imagined telling my dad and watching his face light up. But now I wasn't sure if telling him would feel good at all. I took a deep breath. "Can I have a little time to think?" I asked. My dad nodded slowly, standing up. "Don't take too long," he said, then walked out of my room, closing the door behind him. The moment I was alone, I went straight to the drawer and pulled it open. I moved the papers aside and picked up the scratch card. It was still there, still perfect, still holding the same promise it had the night I scratched it. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling. I thought about how one choice could decide the future, for me, for Lily, for my dad. I knew I couldn't keep it hidden forever. But I also knew that once I revealed it, there was no going back. I sat on my bed, holding it tightly, trying to imagine every possible outcome. Part of me wanted to run out right now and hand it to my dad, watch his surprise. Another part of me wanted to keep it to myself until I was sure Lily wouldn't waste it. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept thinking over and over about what I should do. And when the sun rose the next morning, I still didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing. This was going to be the most important decision I had ever made in my life. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my cup of coffee while my mind felt like a storm. I barely tasted the drink. All I could think about was the scratch card in my drawer upstairs. It was like a secret weight I carried on my shoulders, and every time I looked at my dad or heard Lily's voice, that weight felt heavier. My dad walked in, already dressed for work, and his eyes went straight to me. He didn't say good morning, which told me everything I needed to know. He was still thinking about our conversation from last night. "Have you decided?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. I glanced at him, my stomach twisting. I hated this feeling, being stuck between what's right for me and what's right for my family. "I'm still thinking," I said quietly, taking another sip of coffee. I could see the disappointment in his face, even though he tried to hide it. He sighed, grabbed his lunch bag, and headed toward the door. "We don't have much time, Hannah," he said before leaving. The sound of the door closing felt like a punch in the chest. I turned my head and saw Lily walking in, her hair messy, wearing a robe, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. She didn't even greet me. She opened the fridge, grabbed a juice box, and sat across from me. "So, Dad told me you're helping me out," she said, her voice dripping with assumption as if it was already decided. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to see if she would say anything else, maybe thank me, maybe admit she had messed up. But no, she just kept sipping her juice, scrolling on her phone, and after a minute she looked up. "It's not that big of a deal, Hannah. You've been saving for years. You can make it back. But me, I could get hurt if I don't pay these people." My jaw tightened. "And whose fault is that?" I asked softly. Her eyes narrowed for a second, then she rolled them. "Oh, please, don't start lecturing me. You don't know what it's like to live a little." That sentence made my blood boil. Live a little. I thought about the nights I stayed up baking cookies to sell, the weekends I worked while she went to parties, the times I said no to fun so I could save for my dream. I had been living, but in my own way, planning for the future, not throwing it away. "Lily," I said, leaning forward, "you're asking me to give up my future because you didn't think before you spent your money." She smirked like I was being dramatic. "It's just money, Hannah, just money." That's when I realized she would never understand, not unless something forced her to. I finished my coffee and went back to my room. I opened my drawer again, staring at the scratch card. I imagined walking into the kitchen, slapping it on the table, and saying, "Here, this solves your problem." But then I imagined her reaction, how she'd probably celebrate for a day and then waste whatever was left. I couldn't stand the thought of that. The rest of the day dragged on. I went to work, smiled at customers, stocked shelves, but my mind was somewhere else. At one point, my coworker Sarah, yes, the same one who had given me the scratch card, asked if I was okay. I wanted to tell her everything, but I kept my mouth shut. This was too big to share. When I got home that evening, Dad was in the living room talking on the phone. His voice was low, serious. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell it was about Lily's debt. I went to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich, and Lily was there again, leaning against the counter, scrolling on her phone like always. "So," she said casually, "are you gonna give Dad the money tomorrow?" The way she said it made me want to scream. It wasn't even a request anymore, it was an expectation. That's when a thought hit me. If I just gave her my savings, she'd think she could always rely on me to clean up her mess. But if I gave her the scratch card, she'd think it was just luck, not my sacrifice. Neither option felt good. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mom. If she were here, what would she tell me? She always taught us to help each other, but she also believed in learning lessons the hard way. I remembered something she used to say. If someone keeps falling because they're careless, you can help them stand once, but you can't be their legs forever. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about respect. Respect for my hard work, respect for my future, and respect for me as a person. The next morning, Dad called me into the living room before he left for work. "Hannah, we need to settle this today. The people Lily owes money to, they're not patient. I don't want things to get ugly." Lily was sitting on the couch, looking at me with an expression that was almost smug. I took a deep breath and said, "I'll take care of it." Dad looked relieved. Lily smiled. But inside, I was still torn. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and picked up the scratch card again. This time, I didn't just hold it. I stared at it for so long that the colors started to blur. One way or another, this card was going to leave my hands soon. The only question was how. I sat on my bed that morning holding the scratch card, my heart pounding like I was about to commit some kind of crime. The sun was shining through the curtains, but my room still felt dark because of the weight of the decision hanging over me. I had told Dad I would take care of it, but even I didn't know exactly what that meant yet. Was I going to hand over my savings? Was I going to give him the scratch card? Or was I going to come up with some other plan completely? My brain was spinning in circles. I put the card down on my desk and just stared at it. The colors were bright, the numbers printed perfectly, the confirmation symbols at the bottom shining faintly in the light. It looked so small, so harmless, but it could change everything. The sound of footsteps in the hallway snapped me out of my thoughts. The door opened and Lily leaned inside without knocking, like she always did. "So," she said, "are we going to the bank today or what?" Her tone was so casual, as if we were talking about going shopping. I forced myself to stay calm. "I told Dad I'd handle it," I replied. "Good," she said, smiling in that lazy way of hers, and then she left without even saying thank you. I stared at the doorway after she was gone, my blood boiling. That was it. That was the moment I decided, if I was going to give anything, it wouldn't be for her to waste. If I used the scratch card, I'd make sure it went somewhere she couldn't mess up. I slipped the card into my bag, grabbed my jacket, and headed outside. I needed air. I walked around the neighborhood, thinking. Every time I imagined giving the card to Dad, I pictured the relief on his face, but also the look on Lily's face when she realized she didn't have to change at all. And every time I thought about keeping it for myself, I felt guilty. I ended up at the park near our house. I sat on a bench watching kids play and parents talk, and I thought about how life can change so quickly. One piece of cardboard, one coin scratch, and you could go from struggling to secure. I took the card out of my bag and just held it, turning it over in my hands. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. "Can you come home soon? I have to leave for work, but I want to talk before I go." My stomach twisted. This was it. Decision time. I walked home slowly, almost hoping something would delay me. But when I got there, Dad was waiting in the living room, already wearing his jacket. Lily was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, phone in hand. Dad stood up as soon as I walked in. "So, what's the plan?" I could feel my heart beating in my ears. I took a deep breath, reached into my bag, and pulled out the scratch card. "This," I said quietly. Dad frowned. "What's that?" Lily leaned forward, curious. "It's a scratch card," I explained. "I got it from a friend. I scratched it, and it's a winner." Their eyes widened at the same time. "How much?" Lily asked immediately, her voice almost greedy. I didn't answer her. I looked at Dad. "Enough to pay off Lily's debt, enough to fix a lot of things." For a second, there was silence. Then Lily broke it with a laugh. "Well, then give it to me. That solves everything." I held it tighter. "No," I said firmly. "I'll give it to Dad. He can use it to pay off your debt directly." "You're not getting the money in your hands." Her smile dropped. "That's not fair," she snapped. "It's my debt." "Exactly," I said, my voice steady. "And you've shown you can't handle money. This way it gets paid and you don't waste what's left." Dad looked between us, clearly unsure what to say. I could tell he was shocked, not just about the card, but about the fact that I had been hiding it. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked. I hesitated. "Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to use it." "I worked hard for my savings, Dad. This card was like a sign to finally do something for myself, but I can't just stand by if Lily's in danger." My voice cracked a little, but I kept my eyes on him. "That doesn't mean I'm okay with her wasting it." Lily rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic, just hand it over." That's when I decided to say something I had been holding back for a long time. "You know what, Lily? You've been careless for years. You borrow without asking, you break things without apologizing, and you expect everyone to clean up your mess. Well, not anymore. This card will help you, but only if you learn something from it." She glared at me, but I didn't care. I turned to Dad. "You take it. Handle it how you think is best. But if Lily ends up in this kind of trouble again, don't come to me for help." Dad nodded slowly, taking the card from my hand. For a second, our fingers touched, and I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had just given away the thing that could have made my dreams come true, but maybe I was saving something bigger, my family. I stood there, trying to breathe, while Lily muttered something under her breath. I didn't even want to know what it was. At that moment, I realized something important. Money can solve problems, but it can't fix people. That's something they have to do for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the start of Lily finally growing up. By the way, if you're still watching, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And seriously, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Dad slipped the scratch card into his jacket pocket and left for work. Lily stayed on the couch, sulking. I went back to my room and sat on my bed, staring at the wall. I had made my choice. Now I just had to wait and see what would happen next. The house felt strangely quiet after Dad left with the scratch card. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel the air itself was heavier. I stayed in my room for a while, staring at my phone without really using it. Every few minutes, I'd check the time, wondering if Dad had cashed it yet or if there was some kind of process. My stomach twisted every time I thought about the possibility that something could go wrong. What if I had read the numbers wrong? What if there was some technicality that meant it wasn't a winner after all? That fear sat in my chest like a rock. I didn't want to walk out to the living room, but eventually my hunger forced me to. Lily was there, still on the couch, scrolling on her phone. She didn't even look at me at first, but when she finally did, her eyes narrowed. "You didn't have to make such a big show of it," she said. "You could have just given me the card and been done with it." I opened the fridge and pulled out some bread. "You could have been more grateful," I replied without turning around. She scoffed. "Grateful? You embarrassed me in front of Dad, making it look like I can't be trusted with money." I turned to face her, holding the bread in one hand. "You can't." She opened her mouth to argue but didn't have anything to say. She just rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. The rest of the afternoon dragged by. I kept imagining Dad at the lottery office or wherever you go to claim a winning scratch card, filling out paperwork, maybe talking to officials. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, but it was never him. It was just random notifications. When he finally called, it was nearly 5 p.m. I answered so fast I almost dropped my phone. "Hannah," he said, and I could hear the mix of exhaustion and excitement in his voice. "It's real. It's a winner. After taxes, it's still enough to cover Lily's debt completely and leave a good amount left over." My knees went weak. That's good," I said quietly. He paused for a moment before adding, "I'm going to the bank tomorrow to handle the payment for her debt directly. You did the right thing." Hearing that made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't describe. It was relief, but also a strange kind of sadness. Relief that it worked out, sadness that the dream I had for that card was gone. After we hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, just thinking. Eventually, Lily came in. She leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "So, Dad says my debt will be gone tomorrow," she said, almost like she was daring me to react. "Good for you," I replied. She tilted her head. "You know, you made a big deal about trust, but it still ended up with you bailing me out. So what's the point?" That made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. "The point is you didn't get the money in your hands. You don't get to waste it. You don't get to turn it into another problem. It's handled, and now you have a chance to do better." She smirked. "We'll see." She left, and I sat there wondering if she would actually change. That night, I couldn't sleep again. My mind replayed the moment I handed Dad the card, over and over, wondering if I had made the right choice. I thought about Mom again, about the lessons she would have wanted us to learn. I remembered her telling me once that sometimes helping someone isn't about giving them what they want. It's about making sure they get what they need, even if they don't like it. The next morning, Dad left early for the bank. I stayed home, waiting. Every sound outside made me think he was back. Finally, just after lunch, the front door opened and he walked in with a stack of papers in his hand. "It's done," he said, smiling faintly. "Her debt is paid, and there's money left in a savings account for emergencies." Lily followed him in, looking annoyed. "They wouldn't give me any of it," she muttered. Dad looked at her sternly. "That's because it's not for spending. You're lucky your sister stepped in at all." She didn't respond, just stormed off to her room. Dad sat down and rubbed his forehead. "I hope she understands what this means," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I just nodded. Inside, I wasn't sure she understood anything yet, but maybe time would teach her. That night, I sat by my window, looking out at the streetlights, thinking about how one piece of cardboard had caused so much tension, so much talking, so much change. My dream of using that money for myself was gone, but maybe I had bought something else instead. Time for Lily to wake up and realize she couldn't live like this forever. Whether she would take that chance or waste it, well, that was up to her now. The first few days after Lily's debt was cleared were quiet, almost too quiet. She didn't speak much to me, and when she did, her words were clipped, short, like every sentence was an effort. I thought maybe the silence meant she was thinking about what had happened, maybe even feeling guilty. But by the end of the week, I realized I had been too hopeful. It started small, packages arriving at the door, new clothes that she definitely hadn't owned before, take-out food from expensive places. I watched her carry bags into her room and close the door behind her without a word. My chest tightened. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. She wasn't learning anything. She was just starting the cycle again, maybe not with borrowed money yet, but with the same careless attitude. Dad noticed too. One evening, he called us both into the living room. His voice was firm. "We need to talk," he said, looking straight at Lily. "Your sister sacrificed something huge for you. That card could have changed her life, but she gave it to help you instead, and I'm already seeing you go back to your old ways." Lily shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just living my life," she muttered. "Living your life doesn't mean ignoring the lesson," Dad shot back. "You were in danger, Lily. Do you want to end up there again?" She rolled her eyes and leaned back into the couch. "You're overreacting." My jaw clenched, but I stayed quiet. I knew if I spoke, it would turn into another fight. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "You have one more chance. If I see you being reckless again, I'm cutting you off completely. No money, no bailouts, nothing." She didn't respond, just crossed her arms and stared at the TV. I sat there, feeling like I was watching a slow-motion train wreck. After the talk, I went back to my room, but I couldn't stop thinking. Had my sacrifice been pointless? I had imagined that helping Lily would be a wake-up call, but maybe she would never wake up. That night, I pulled out my notebook, the one I used to plan my bakery dream. I hadn't opened it since the day I gave Dad the scratch card. The pages were full of ideas, recipes, and even a rough budget. My fingers traced the ink lines, and I felt a dull ache in my chest. That dream wasn't dead, but it felt far away now. Over the next week, things got worse. I heard Lily on the phone with friends, making plans for nights out, talking about buying new things. One afternoon, she came into my room holding a designer purse. "Look what I got," she said with a grin. I stared at it, knowing it must have cost a fortune. "Where did you get the money for that?" I asked. "I've been saving," she lied, but her eyes gave her away. I didn't press it. I just turned back to my work, feeling the anger boil inside me. That evening, Dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly. "I see it too. She's slipping back." I sighed. "So what now?" He looked down at his hands. "Now we wait. She's been warned. If she ignores it, she'll have to face the consequences herself." I nodded, but inside I knew it wouldn't be easy to watch. A few days later, the inevitable happened. I came home from work to find Dad packing in the living room and Lily sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking annoyed. "She borrowed money from a friend," Dad said the moment I walked in. "Already?" My stomach dropped. "Are you serious?" I asked, looking at Lily. She shrugged. "It's just a small amount. I'll pay it back." I couldn't even find words. This wasn't just stubbornness, it was self-destruction. Dad sat down heavily, rubbing his face. "I'm done," he said quietly. "From now on, she's on her own." Lily scoffed and stormed off to her room, slamming the door. I stood there, the weight of my earlier choice pressing down on me harder than ever. I had thought the scratch card would solve the problem, but maybe it had only delayed it. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my bakery notebook again. For the first time since giving away the card, I let myself imagine a future where I could still make it happen. It would take longer now, maybe years, but I wasn't going to give up. If Lily wasn't going to change, then I had to make sure I didn't either. I had to keep working, keep saving, keep moving forward, because if I didn't, I'd be stuck in the same place forever. And I refused to let that happen. The weeks that followed felt like two separate lives happening under the same roof. In my life, I worked extra shifts, took on catering orders for small parties, and slowly started putting money back into my savings account. Every night before bed, I would write in my notebook, tweaking recipes, planning costs, and looking at potential locations for my future bakery, even if it was just wishful thinking for now. In Lily's life, things went downhill fast. Her so-called small debt to a friend grew into something much bigger. I overheard her late-night calls, whispering angrily, promising to pay back soon. I recognized the tone. It was the same desperation I had heard before, the same one Dad had warned her about. I wanted to ignore it to focus on my own life, but it's hard to shut out the sound of your sister slowly sinking. One Saturday evening, I came home from work to find Lily sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes, an empty mug in front of her. Dad was standing by the counter, his arms crossed tightly. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. "Tell her," Dad said to Lily. She looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm in trouble," she admitted, her voice small. I didn't speak. I just waited. "I borrowed money from a guy," she continued, avoiding my eyes. "Not a bank, not a friend. Someone different." My stomach tightened. I didn't need her to explain. I knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't the kind of person you could pay back late. Dad's voice was low but steady. "They want the money by next Friday, Hannah, or there will be trouble." I shook my head slowly. "You know I don't have it," I said. "I've started saving again, but it's nowhere near enough, and even if I did, I'm not doing this twice." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I messed up." I thought I could handle it, but her voice cracked and she buried her face in her hands. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part, the stronger part, was tired. Tired of watching her repeat the same mistakes. Tired of being the safety net. Dad sat down beside her, his voice gentler now. "This is it, Lily. Either you figure out how to fix this yourself or you face what comes. I can't protect you forever." She nodded weakly, but I could tell fear was starting to settle in. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Lily barely ate. She jumped every time the phone rang. I kept my head down, but inside I was wrestling with something bigger than anger or pity. I was thinking about that day I gave away the scratch card. Had I done the right thing? Or had I just given her one more chance to prove she wouldn't change? On Thursday night, the answer came loud and clear. I was in my room, working on a new cupcake recipe, when I heard banging on the front door, loud, hard, impatient. Dad answered, and a deep voice rumbled through the hallway. I couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a threat. I stepped into the living room and saw two men standing there, tall and broad, their faces cold. Lily was behind Dad, pale as paper. "She has until tomorrow night," one of the men said. "No more excuses." And then they were gone. The silence afterward was deafening. Dad turned to Lily, his face ashen. "You deal with this," he said quietly, then walked to his room without another word. Lily looked at me, her eyes wide and trembling. "Hannah, please." My heart was pounding, but my voice came out firm. "No, Lily, this is the moment you either take responsibility or you lose everything. I can't save you again." She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, and I went back to my room, closing the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the knock on the door, the heavy footsteps leaving. I didn't know what Lily would do, but I knew tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The morning after the knock on the door, the house was unnaturally still. I woke up early, half expecting to hear Lily crying or packing the hallway, but there was nothing, just the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Dad was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, staring into it like he was trying to find answers there. "She's gone," he said without looking at me. My chest tightened. "Gone where?" He shook his head. "No note, no call, just gone." I didn't know whether to feel worried or relieved. Part of me feared she might be running from her problems again, but another part hoped she was finally taking the first step to face them. The whole day passed without a single word from her. By nightfall, I had almost convinced myself she wasn't coming back. Then, just after 10 p.m., the door creaked open. Lily stepped inside, looking exhausted, her hair messy, her clothes rumpled. She dropped a small envelope on the table. "It's paid," she said simply. Dad and I just stared at her. "How?" I asked. She sank into the chair across from me. "I sold almost everything I owned, the purse, the clothes, my laptop. I called a friend and asked her to help me sell the rest. It wasn't easy, but I did it." Her voice was quiet but steady, and for the first time in a long time, I heard something different in it, resolve. "They won't come back?" Dad asked cautiously. Lily shook her head. "No, it's done." The relief that washed over me was unexpected. I had been so sure she'd find a way to drag us all down again, but maybe, just maybe, this was her turning point. She took a deep breath and looked at me. "Hannah, I owe you more than I can ever pay back. I've been selfish. I've been stupid. You gave up something huge for me and I almost threw it away. I can't change the past, but I can change now. I want to be better. I will be better." I studied her face, searching for any hint of the old Lily, the one who made promises she never kept. but there was something different in her eyes, something that made me believe her even if it was just a little. "I hope you mean that," I said softly. She nodded. "I do." In the weeks that followed, Lily kept her word. She got a second job, stopped buying unnecessary things, and started paying back the people she owed. We still had our arguments. Change doesn't happen overnight, but I could see the effort. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying her on my shoulders. One evening, as I was mixing batter for a small catering order, Lily came into the kitchen and placed an envelope on the counter. "It's not much," she said, "but it's for your bakery fund." I opened it and found a stack of small bills inside. My throat tightened. "Lily." "No," she interrupted. "It's the least I can do. You gave up your dream for me once. I'm going to help you get it back." I smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the weight between us lifted. We still had a long way to go, both of us, but I realized something important that night. Family isn't about always fixing each other's mistakes. It's about standing by each other while we learn how to fix them ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, my dream wasn't lost after all.